Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
G.I. Joe, the very best, Americas Elite. Eliter than all the rest, trained to have no flaws. Defending liberty across the land, valor oversized. Bring out that big brass band, real heroes verified. Gotta read them all, you must agree. Elitist in history, G.I. Joe, oh there could be no end. In a world we must defend, G.I. Joe, gotta read them all. A courageous crew, their colors red, white and blue. Mess with them and they'll shoot you. G.I. Joe, gotta read them all. Gotta read them all. Yeah.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe Comics podcast. If you're new to the show, you can find out all about us over at our website, talkingjoe.co.uk is that website. We are back today once more with Talking Joe Disavowed, where we look at the Devil's Due era of G.I. Joe. And we continue with G.I. Joe Americas Elite issue 25 through to 28 today. They were released July through November 2007. Now, the exciting thing is that this is the first 4 chapters of World War III, which many hold up as being the peak, the pinnacle of the Devil's Due era. So we'll dig in and see if we agree. If you're reading along in collected editions, this is collected in a couple of places. Firstly, as a 2008 trade paperback, America's Elite trade paperback, the World War III Omnibus, which collected all 12 parts together. And the other place was the 2014 trade paperback, America's Elite Volume 5 from IDW, which collected issues 25 through to 30. Now, talking to me about these issues will be my co-host. It's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners. And hello, Agent Delta, wherever you are out there listening to this podcast.
On your high-tech, cutting-edge 2007 mobile phone. I was reading the issue thinking, oh, they've got kind of like those cheap, burner phones. And then I thought, actually, no, that's just what phones looked like in 2007.
I still have my 2000. I'm not using it, but I have kept in a little case where my wife and I have sort of like actual treasures, like family items, and also novelty items that are not valuable or fancy. I have my oldest phone, my second oldest phone, and my third oldest phone. Mm-hmm. You should probably cut that. No one cares. Yeah, but one's a flip phone, and etc. They all look like burner phones.
So these issues were brought to us by Script, Mark Powers, Pencils, Mike Baer, with Mike Shoyket on issue 27. So I think a rule is that you have to be called Mike to work on this book, like Mike Baer, Mike Shoyket, and Mike O'Sullivan. The colours were brought to us by Mike Beaulieu. The letters were from Mike Crowley. The military advisor was Mike Kost, and the editor was Mike O'Sullivan.
That was your host, Mike, and I'm Mike Finn, and this has been Talking Joe. Nobody beats Talking Joe.
Talking Mike.
Real Talking Mike. Talking into this microphone.
So Mark Powers, Script, Pencils, Mike Baer, Mike Shoyket, Colours, Jean-Francois Beaulieu, Letters, Brian Crowley, Military Advisor, Phil Kost, Editor, a.k.a. Drill Sergeant, a.k.a. Supreme Commander, Mike O'Sullivan. And speaking of Mike O'Sullivan, we interviewed him a little while back and touched on the subject of World War III. I mean, an interesting dynamic to this particular story is that partway through its creation, Devil's Due found out that it was losing the G.I. Joe license, so had to curtail their overall plans for this issue. And indeed, they had to fight a little just to get the 12 issues published, because they had the outline approved and they'd solicited as the story as being a 12-parter when they found out that they'd lost the license. And in principle, they wouldn't be allowed to continue the story, long enough to be able to conclude it. And so had to work with Hasbro to get an agreement on that aspect. Here's Mike talking about the Hasbro lead who helped them complete their story.
We lost the Joe license, and she advocated for us to be able to finish printing the World War III story. So we didn't have the license for the last 7 issues of that story. And she fought for us to be able to finish our story because she knew how much we put into that and how badly we wanted that to be a magnum opus of our G.I. Joe run.
Okay, so you had presumably pitched and gotten approved a 12-part story that would take a year. And
yes,
but knowing that 5 months in, your license would either be renewed, would either end or would be renewed.
I never knew.
Okay.
I never knew that.
That's a step above you.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we proposed World War III as the 12 issues, the overall arc, and then we had to submit individual issues to be approved as such. And then it was a total surprise to me that we lost the license. It was a surprise to all of us. I think even to Josh, I think he was blown away that we didn't get it back. The Transformers movie was what really made that decision for Hasbro. They just wanted to make more money. And they were thinking the G.I. Joe movie was going to be the same nuclear bomb, huge cultural moment as the Transformers movie was. So when we lost the license, and this woman at Hasbro really advocated that for us to be able to finish our story, we had to rework a lot of World War III, how it ended, where, to bring things to a natural conclusion rather than being the launching point for the next couple of years of storytelling, all of that. So that's probably the most special moment for me, was just her letting us do that. Because World War III, I'm incredibly proud of that story. I really, as a Joe fan, that was the type of story that I wanted to see. I wanted to have one that included everybody and was just huge in scope, and things happened that actually affected characters, and it was a multi-part story with really cool covers, and so it was really great that she let us finish, that she fought for us. So that's probably the crown jewel of the good moments that I had with Hasbro.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
The cover of issue 25, I was sort of joking to myself that we should just do a whole episode about this cover. Because...
Can you name the Joes?
So there was a contest at the time, and one of these letters pages refers to it, and that must be on the Devil's Due website, the Devil's Due discussion board, because it had not been mentioned in the previous letters pages. And this cover is more than 200 Joes, all standing on... It's actually, you actually can't quite tell if it's bleachers or steps. I think it's technically... Oh, you can see it just on the far right corner behind Snake Eyes on the bottom. Steps. They're in front of the Capitol in DC, and I actually don't remember if the left side has the House and the right side has the Senate, or vice versa. But I think they're in front of the left side, and the Capitol Dome is behind them. And this cover is so much fun because it's just all out. It's every Joe you can think of, all of the obscure ones, and I immediately looked for me, the two most obscure Joes that both make me chuckle and also aggravate me. One is Double Blast, which is a re-release of Roadblock from, 2002 or 3. I think in in a 2-pack, but Hasbro had lost the name Roadblock, and it was definitely Roadblock. It's the original Roadblock figure. And they gave him a different code name, and then his file card refers to a different character, right? So there's just this like identical twin of Roadblock running around G.I. Joe team if you count every action figure as your full character continuity, even though he never showed up in the comic book. So I was looking for him, and wouldn't you know, on the back cover, about halfway up next to Countdown, there's a guy who looks exactly like version 1 Roadblock. But, you know, Devils do Roadblock, who's sort of bigger and has more like SWAT armor, bulletproof vest thing, and a much more substantial goatee. He's on the front cover at the bottom. And then I was also looking for another sort of, to me, infamous recolor. In 93, Hasbro recolored version 3 Storm Shadow, but he looks exactly like Storm Shadow because he's still all in white, but he's got some orange and blue accents, and he came with a really silly Ninja Force vehicle, and his code name is Ginsu, and there he is on the front cover under the first letters of Americas Elite. He's under the M, one person down from that. And this is an actual G.I. Joe character, but they've changed his colors a little bit here because the toy has a white hood and an orange face mask, but the package painting has an orange hood and a darker face mask color, and so that's sort of what they're following here. And the reason why I'm spending so long talking about this is that I think sometimes kid logic, you know, it's like if you couldn't get Roadblock, you might buy Double Blast and just pretend it's Roadblock. If you couldn't get Storm Shadow, you might get Ginsu and just pretend it's Storm Shadow because it still kind of is. At the same time, I'm also sort of irked at Hasbro for daring to water down these very specific character designs and toys by, you know, deigning to release them with slightly different colors and calling them other characters and sort of hoping that we would accept it. And I think we all did. Anyway, this cover is super fun. It's all drawn together. And so a comparison here is the Jamie Sullivan cover to A Real American Hero 300, which was published in December of 2022 from IDW, which had every Joe and Cobra on it. And those characters were all drawn separately. And we talk a lot about that in our issue 300 episode of Talking Joe. I don't spend a ton of time staring at comics anymore because I feel like I'm often reading comics in a hurry, either for this show or just to keep on top of, you know, what's new and important at my store. I absolutely pay proper attention to all G.I. Joe reading material for Talking Joe, I promise you. But and I sort of forced myself to just get lost in this cover for like 5 or 10 minutes and just not look at the guide, which I sort of remembered there had been, and just keep looking at Joe's and quizzing myself. Do I know who this is? I know who this is. Oh, do I know this code name? Oh, this guy's a little hard to tell. Is this a later design? Is this someone who looks a lot like someone else? You know, there are a bunch of, I think, jugglers on the front cover, sort of 2 rows behind Colton. And I don't remember their names. And then there are some characters who, you know, you have just enough of their costume to sort of not know who they are unless you're a real thorough G.I. Joe fan. And then there are some Joes, Mark, jump in here. There are some Joes who are not technically Real American Hero characters, right? When you get up to who's got the glasses on the back cover, sort of just in front of Sergeant Slaughter. I feel like that's a guy from
Oh yeah, that looks like Sergeant Savage type characters, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I see 3 Sergeant Savage characters. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry, I'm flipping back and forth from the guide that's in the issue 13. Yeah, I see Dynamite and D-Day and Sergeant Savage.
Mm-hmm.
And I see the Fridge, who, got a toy and never showed up in the cartoon or in the comic book, although he was animated for a few seconds for a TV commercial. So if you count the animation for the TV commercials as sort of connected to the animation for the TV show. And then I also see, who's the guy with the red beret and the eye patch? He's all the way in the center. If you're looking at the actual comic book, he's sort of at the folds just above the staple. So he must be...
yeah, without the guide, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but that's Lieutenant Stone.
232. Yes. Who's that? Who's Lieutenant Stone?
Is he Sigma 6?
Oh, is he? Well, Lieutenant Stone is a G.I. Joe Extreme character, but G.I. Joe, but Stone looks like Duke basically. He just looks like a blonde guy who wears green, and this is a guy with a red beret and an eye patch. So
Yeah, they said there's this on the Wikipedia. It says that there's 3 different iterations of people carrying the Stone name. G.I. Joe Extreme, G.I. Joe Sigma 6, and a Sergeant Stone
he's in the movie
The Rise of Cobra, played by Brendan Fraser. So I think this is Sigma 6 version.
Okay.
Yes, Sigma 6.
Okay, cool.
He's got a sort of a red beret, a black suit, and an eye patch.
I also see some characters from the cartoon, like Admiral Ledger and Colonel Sharp, who never got toys. Okay, so all right, so I probably talked about this one cover enough. All right, so I'm going to point out a bunch of things that jump out at me. The background looks like it might be pencils only and not inks, and I'm saying that based on sort of the shading between the columns. But it might also just be inked with like a micron pen. Something that has always struck me about this cover is that a bunch of the characters are leaning slightly to the left. And I have no business in any way criticizing, much less critiquing this cover, because I actually think this cover is sort of critique proof. Like, you just can't talk about it the way that you would a lot of other covers, because it is such a fun, tough to make, celebration. I do find the colors, I don't love the colors on this cover, because I feel like there's some black mixed in with a lot of the colors, and also some white. If you look at Colton in the front, his green is sort of a dirty green, but there are also some like white highlights on him. And I feel like, it's a blue sky up there, but it's not a bright blue sky. It's sort of a dull blue sky, like a hazy blue sky. And I think a cover like this, an idea might be to slightly render characters. Everyone has a little bit of a shadow on their left side, and I feel like some characters are actually casting a little bit of shadow onto whoever is behind them. Look at Firewall's hair in front of, is it Dojo on the front cover, sort of in the center? Sort of her black hair in front of his yellow chest plate. Same thing's happening with Spirit. There's a cast shadow behind his hair onto is that Zap? And I don't love the coloring in this cover. I think a more flat, less black, less white mixed in. But it is a super fun cover. And then help me out here. Did Adam Riches in the early 200s for IDW for a convention exclusive cover, did he then do sort of a Cobra counterpart to this cover?
Yes, that's right. Adam Riches drew a variant cover for issue 212 in 2015 for Emerald City Comics, which coincided with JoeCon 2015. And this was a very similar composition with all of the Cobra characters sort of on like bleachers, and over onto the right as the background is a Terradrome.
Okay. And all right, so there are sort of the comparisons. I actually think this is, I know you often just let me go when we're talking about covers and you don't say much, but I think this cover really does sort of deserve its own episode and a few moments. So, Mark, what do you want to say about this cover?
I was just going to note that it's it was a Guinness World Records breaking cover. It wasn't recognized at the time, but it was sort of retrospectively recognized after a Deadpool wedding cover won the record, and then people pointed out that actually there's been other covers before then that have had more characters. So it won the record for most comic book characters on a single issue cover, featuring 236 named characters, not counting animals and pets, which include Order, Max, and Spirit's Eagle Freedom. So, there was, I think, a credited long list of assists in terms of getting the names of who should be there and the references and things like that. So they call out thanks to Sam Wells, Mike O'Sullivan, Peter Sonfranas, Joshua Fritz, Timothy Straub, Jeff Bond, Phil Kost, and James McFadden for assists. I spoke a little while back to the artist Chris Lai about the cover, and I will put in a clip from that here.
So I was so excited because I love drawing very detailed stuff. In my other comic books, I draw very detailed. Like I did D&D books that's very, very detailed as well. So when they give me the assignments, I actually draw it in a huge paper, like I think 4 times of regular papers.
Yeah, I saw in another interview you said it was 20 inches by 28 inches, so huge.
Yeah, it's huge. So it's very difficult to so I think I spent around 2 weeks to do it. Kind of, yeah, like basically placing and then sketching and then inking, and then the problem came when I have to scan it. So my my scanner is A3, so I have to like stitching 6 scans together to match, and then I could send the drawings to Devas to be colored. So yeah, it's a unforgettable artwork. So I still have it in my office. Yeah. I actually frame it.
Is it
Yeah.
on? It's on a frame, isn't it, on your wall?
Yeah, it's on the frame, but yeah, this is like one of the highlights of my drawing career.
Excellent. And how did you decide which characters to use and then also go about figuring out how to fit them all in?
I think at that time, the instructions from the editorial teams was to put the current team on this front,
All right. Yeah.
around this front area, and
Yeah.
then the not so, I mean, like, then the next the next will be here on the back, on the back cover, and then the rest of the character should go up based on the kind of popularity kind of things. So the less popular character probably will be put more on the back.
Back at the top. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you like start off with like stick figures almost, like to figure out where everyone's going and then sort of just go from there?
Yeah, not really stick figure, but I just draw like a proportion, like if let's say Duke, I make it a bit bigger, and then if it's a girl, I make it a bit smaller. So I try to arrange that with the kind of like a blocky kind of body blocks, something like that, and then go up from there, like, like between the two heads, I'm gonna put another character like that, something like that. So make sure everybody, at least the torso can be seen, a bit, so the people will recognize the character, basically, not just the head, but there's a bit of the torso as well. Yeah,
that's wild. And your architecture background coming into play here as well, with a nice rendered background.
yeah, that's true. It takes a while to do that.
My last comments about this cover, I want to say a positive and a not so positive. The not so positive is by the time you were looking at the characters on the top left of the back cover, like the Fridge and Robo-Joe, I'm very aware that we are looking at them straight on. They are at the same perspective, the people in the back row, as the people in the front row. So maybe the perspective here is a little fudged and we're actually not on the ground looking straight on at all the people on the ground level. Maybe we're sort of halfway up, like on another set of bleachers. And you might do that for a camera, right? You might get a camera up, 30 feet because you've got Joes all the way up to 60 feet. But I start to get distracted because the Capitol building behind Fridge and Robo-Joe is very much now in 3-point perspective, angling triangularly up away from us. And so this cover is so much fun and is such a feat. And I would love to look at the original art somewhere in a gallery. The characters on the front cover, the perspective works. The characters on the back cover on the top start to not match the background. So there's my not so good. And the last thing I want to say is there is a concerted effort here to draw different faces on all these characters. And that is so cool on top of what was already a really challenging project, right? It's not just if you compare Colton to Duke next to him, Colton has lines under his eyes. It's that characters have different heights and shapes for their noses and their jaws, right? Chuckles is on the front cover, 2 people behind Duke, and Chuckles has certain nose and cheekbones and jaw, and Long Range has a different nose and cheekbones and jaw, and that happens all over this cover. And so I just want to call out Chris Lai that this cover is so amazing and fun, and congratulations. And not only that, but all the characters, not just different costumes, not just different hairstyles, and some have helmets and goatees, but different facial structures, different likenesses. Okay. There is a variant cover for this issue, which was a convention exclusive, and it is Mike Baer and Clayton Brown and Francois Beaulieu drawing the sort of main 11 Joes from this story, the sort of core team from the last 2 years of America's Elite. And they're standing in front of a flag, and they've all pumping their fists in the air with an arm or two raised up. And this refers back to some animation and Hasbro promotional art that we saw in the early and mid 80s. The cover to issue 26 is by Mike Baer and Jean-Francois Beaulieu, and it is the Cobra characters who were revealed as Phoenix Guard, right? So, Major Blood, Scrap Iron, Zorana, Copperhead. Was Major Blood in Phoenix Guard?
He wasn't in Phoenix Guards, but he was locked up. Yeah, Scrap Iron, Zorana, Copperhead weren't they?
And then behind them are 4 Cobra soldiers, and they are behind bars, and they're all just sort of head to waist here, and there's no background behind them. There's it must be just a wall behind them. And something that sort of occurs to me now looking at this cover is that when Mike Baer draws G.I. Joe comics, he is very sensitively, drawing different faces, not just on this cover, but you see this throughout these 3 issues of these 4 that he drew. And B, he's doing a lot of subtlety with body poses, right? There are 4 Cobras here. I'm not counting the 4 Cobra soldiers in the background. And they're just standing behind bars. And they're all standing a little differently. They've all got, their weight. I think Major Blood is sort of standing on his 2 legs evenly, but you can tell that Copperhead has his weight shifted a little bit more onto one leg than the other because it looks like one shoulder is a little bit higher. And they've all got kind of the same expression, but there's some subtle differences going on. And then I realized one more thing, which I think everyone knows, but you have to call it out. After the initial chapter of this story, chapter 1, issue 25, the remaining chapters have not only a unified trade dress, a unified design for the covers where there's a black banner all the way across the top, and it says in white, a Devil's Due publishing event, part of 12. And then the bottom, about third of the cover, is also black. And it says, it's got the big logo, and then they've got sort of a tidy amount of space for the Devil's Due logo and the price and the month and the issue number and the barcode all the way in the bottom. And so the cover images for chapters 2 through 11 of this story are almost square because they have sort of black on top and black on the bottom. And it gives them a real specific look. It's very clear that this is A, its own story, and B, different than other G.I. Joe comics that have come before. And I guess for that matter, different than the other G.I. Joe comic that's finishing up right around now, Storm Shadow. And this is a thing that publishers do when they want to grab attention. You know, maybe the most famous example in the last 20 years is what Marvel did for all of its Civil War issues and tie-ins. But, you know, in the early 90s, when DC launched its Vertigo imprint, the first like 5 or 10 years of Vertigo comics, the left vertical sort of centimeter of every single Vertigo comic, it didn't matter what it was, Sandman, Hellblazer, Swamp Thing, one-shots, miniseries, had a sort of a color band that the DC Vertigo logo could sit on. And so the artists were sort of aware that they didn't have the full, you know, width to compose in, because a little bit was going to get covered on the left side. Anyway, so I just appreciate this added bit of design. It makes it really clear. The issue number is big and bold on the bottom, but if you are looking at like a spinner rack or kind of a waterfall magazine rack where you only see the top 2/3 of each cover, because the next comic below blocks the bottom third, if you can't see the issue number here, it's really clear what chapter of the 12-part story is. Okay, 27, part 3. This cover feels a little different than the previous one because I think it's inked, and it's CoverGirl and Shipwreck. We're looking slightly up at them. They're in the jungle, which does not correspond to the interior where they're in a desert, but that's okay. Right. And lunging behind them, having, I think, sort of leapt from a high branch, is a very scary looking variant of a range viper, which we'll talk about when we get into the insides. This cover is almost monochrome. It's so desaturated. There's no blue in Shipwreck. There's sort of no red, orange in CoverGirl's hair, right? It's just sort of everything is sort of slightly brown or slightly purple. Quite striking. Really nice atmospheric background silhouettes for this jungle.
So the cover to issue 27 was incorrectly credited to Mike Baer on the inside. The artist of this was actually Kalman Andrasovsky, who, ironically, when I did a Google search to try and find him, the first bit of art that popped up was the cover to the Word Burglar album, Bergonomic. He did the friend of the show, Word Burglar. He did the art for one of his album covers, which is fun.
And the cover for our final issue of this episode, part 4, which is issue 28, is drawn by actually Mike Baer and Clayton Brown and Jean-Francois Beaulieu. This is pretty striking because there's a character who I don't think we know, who is in the foreground, and he's all in green, and he has a long sniper rifle, and he is aiming up and to the left, and it's a little unusual to have comic book characters on covers aiming left. Characters tend to be coming straight out at you or to the right, because, you know, in Western countries we read left to right. Movie posters too, similar sort of unspoken rule. And this character is creating a compositional element where he's dividing the cover in half so that above him and his long rifle, all in blue, are Cobra Commander and Shawmax and some Cobra soldiers. And then below it, all in red, are Snake Eyes and Scarlet making their way through a battle scene. And yes, those are the covers, Mark.
Okay. So last time we looked at the Baroness-focused arc Sins of the Mother, where she tracked down her infant son to Cobra Commander, who exchanged it for control of Mars Industries. So we pick up on those events in a plot breakdown.
Plot breakdown.
In Dagestan, the Joe team, which includes Roadblock and the reinstated Flint, Covergirl, Gung-Ho and Wild Bill, are protecting a Chechen rebel leader from a Cobra attack by Cobra Mortal and Ghost Bear. In Darfur, Cobra Commander recruits a Lieutenant Nick Bailey, convincing him to execute captured Janjaweed militia soldiers in the name of justice. In Scotland, Alexander Destro oversees the Cobra takeover of Mars. Cobra Commander sets up weapons deals with governments across the world to sow chaos. The President's response is to give the Joe carte blanche to wipe out Cobra, to mobilize the full G.I. Joe team of 203 field agents and all of the US military resources. In Japan, Scarlet and Snake Eyes confront Firefly in the old Arashikage clan compound. In Greenland, Major Blood is transferred to a prison called the Coffin. In Boston, a mysterious figure confesses to a priest of a coming war. He is revealed to be Agent Delta, a Joe in deep cover with Cobra. Tomax gives Agent Delta, aka Rourke, a mission to assassinate the Prime Minister of Israel. At the Skeleton Coast in Namibia, Shipwreck and Covergirl, aka Popeye and Greaser, are sent on a mission to capture Skullbuster. After an extended battle, the couple are able to capture him. In Turkey, Clutch and Rock'n'Roll are helping a Mossad agent named Ibrahim to investigate a bombing and prevent escalating conflict in the Middle East. Back on home ground, Duke reunites with his peacenik father, but they are both captured by Interrogator and interrogated. We learn a little more of Duke's backstory before Roadblock arrives and saves them. In Chechnya, Dana, aka Verona, and Falcon make contact with the October Guard in order to relay the message to Russia that Cobra is the force behind the current turmoil in the world. And in the North Atlantic, Blackout sneaks onto a Russian submarine and fires its missiles at Boston. And later the President addresses the nation with a declaration of war. Perhaps the start of World War III. Tim.
Yes. Yes, I think that is fair.
So how did you feel about the devastation of Boston in these issues?
That's actually something I wanted to talk about. We see the missiles. Throughout this chapter 4, we see someone sneak onto this submarine and take out some people within the submarine, and then fire some missiles. And then at the very end, we see some person in a jacket and tie getting to the president at the White House and telling him in a tiny, tiny, tiny word balloon that you can barely read that says, "There's been a missile attack on Boston."
Oh.
I think that's 2-point font. Anyway, you're not supposed to be able to read it necessarily because the president...
No, I assumed it was illegible, and it was certainly illegible to my eyes, but I can see on this digital copy, once I've enhanced, that it does indeed say words.
So the president then tells you in the next panel, the next 2-3 panels, what was just said. So if you can't read it, you're not kept out of loop. And my note for you was, it's not like, oh, I live in Boston, this is funny or sad that my city gets taken out in this comic. It was, Mark, how did you feel that we are shown the buildup of the attack, and then we are not shown the attack, but someone tells us the attack happened? Sort of narratively and visually, how do you feel about that? Because you could spend a page or a couple pages where missiles rain down on South Boston and buildings explode and civilians are running away. And in fact, in this very series, in issues 0 or 1, writer Joe Casey, had a satellite crash in Chicago.
That's right, yeah.
And we do see it. We do see it happen, and we see, things on fire and debris, and some Joes show up to help, and there are also some, emergency, firefighter people and cops and EMTs helping. And so I thought, completely separate from like, hey, I live in Boston, how dare you? Or, hey, I live in Boston, ha, ha, ha. I thought, does this feel like the story wanted 1 or 2 more pages? Is this a way to hold some tension for the next issue when we might see that devastation? Or do we not need to see it because that's gratuitous? We've already seen that kind of thing in issues 0 and 1. And is it enough to have the president actually tell us? And, there are plenty of scenes in these 4 issues where someone refers to something terrible happening and you don't see it on panel. We're sort of checking in before and after, like before and after a massacre, before and after an execution, before and after an attack. And the Joes are reacting, and then they're not just reacting, they're on the offensive, and Cobra Commander and various Cobra agents are either like getting attacked or scooped up, or Cobra Commander is moving his chess pieces. And so I know we're starting at the end of these 4 issues, but narratively, Mark, what did you think of us being told but not being shown this particular attack?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting way of approaching it. And as the president, perhaps that this is the kind of way that you find out something as horrendous as that you are at some swanky event and someone comes and whispers in your ear that something terrible has happened, or you are at a school reading to some children and you find out that something devastating has happened in New York and have to immediately, switch gears and respond. So there is a sort of a more mundane way that I guess a leader of, a president would find out about these kind of events. And I kind of appreciate that there could potentially be a gratuitousness in displaying an attack like that, which did to some degree feel like it was the case in the very early issues of Americas Elite when they did show that attack on Chicago. So I don't mind that we don't wallow in the graphic detail of the attack itself. I did have a kind of half error detected thing about that missile attack, though.
Yeah.
Which, I've kind of had 2 thoughts when it happens. As someone who watches a lot of TV and films where there is a bit of a trope of missile launches from submarines, you kind of know in the back of your head that you need 2 people to have the keys and turn them. So having a lone person on the submarine doing it on their own isn't something that would happen, at least in movie logic. It's possible that mechanically in reality it isn't required.
I hadn't thought of that.
And then the second element is that they sort of talk about these being intercontinental ballistic missiles being delivered, and these submarines are typically carry exclusively nuclear armed ballistic missiles, to serve as a strike capability in the event of nuclear war. So generally they don't have conventional armaments, although in I think theoretically there can be more conventional arms. In my research for this, there was actually an objection made by Russia when the United States were looking into using more conventionally armed cruise missiles as part of their submarine capability, that they objected on the basis that it would be hard for them to know whether a conventional missile was being used or a nuclear missile, and that could potentially result in unintended consequences in terms of a nuclear response to a conventional missile. So there isn't talk specifically of this being a nuclear attack, but on the basis of that is what is generally contained in these air submarines, I think in reality that is what it would be.
Good research. Okay, part 3, since I guess we're going backwards. Let's talk about Skullbuster.
Uh-huh.
So this is a character who first showed up in as you said, a 2-pack in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
This is that funny era when Hasbro was sort of trying one thing and then course correcting. So Skullbuster is a repaint of the original Range Viper with the 1980s articulation, but he comes packed with Heavy Duty, who's got the very 2001, 2002 articulation. Okay.
Right, yeah. Bit of a mismatch.
So Skullbuster is, if you saw him from far away, you'd say, "Oh, that's just a Range Viper in different colors. He's got purple and his face mask is white, as opposed to sort of blue or turquoise and a gray face mask. And his file card in the 2002 toy refers to him as the Range Viper Commander. So, is this the first time? Have we met him before in Devil's Due?
I believe this is the first time that we encounter him, and it's a case of across this series they're introducing characters that have hitherto either been seen very, very briefly or being introduced for this first time, but that, the G.I. Joe Rogues Gallery of Cobras and their designs are amongst the very best across all universes, properties, whatever. And so they are able to sort of pull out these really interesting looking characters that often have already had toys made of them and put them into use for the very first time. And there's a few of those across just these four issues. And what they've done as well is they've not just taken this named Range Viper Skullbuster and used him. They've sort of, in tandem, they've redesigned him and sort of made him very much his own character. They've, by having him kind of go off grid and sort of be shown the way he is with those sort of, dreadlocks, etc. Sort of, get rid of his brain helmet, have it and have that sort of skeleton mask on his face. I believe that this look that they've employed in the comics would have been the inspiration for Shadow Tracker, which was a 2011 Pursuit of Cobra line character who was also released as a classified figure, I believe, or last year, which would be 2023.
Yeah, okay. This guy on the cover, the 27, Skullbuster here specifically, he did ring a bell, but I couldn't place him.
So I think this is a case, where the comic's serving up some inspiration for a later figure. The sort of the look of him is very much take the existing Skullbuster with that skeleton mask, with the purple costume, and just sort of act like he's sort of gone off grid, gone a bit native, really going a little bit cuckoo bananas, Colonel Kurt style from Apocalypse Now. On his own, and sort of, he's said that he's sort of hidden away. So I don't think he's necessarily a character that is an immediate threat to G.I. Joe and to the world at this point in time. He is kind of off grid, but I guess it's a case of G.I. Joe going out, kicking ass, taking names, and sort of wanting to scoop up as many as possible of the known Cobra threats and lock them away in their nice new fancy prison.
Yeah, I wonder if the idea here is to sort of narratively work your way through the ranks of Cobra, so that to add some urgency to the story, the Joes do take down or take out a bunch of Cobra characters right at the beginning. But it's characters that we haven't seen before or haven't seen much of, so that later in the story, it can be bigger characters like Major Blood or Destro or, the Baroness or Scrap Iron. I wonder if, in addition to the sort of...
Some of those are already in prison.
Right.
Scrap Iron and Blood we know are locked up.
Yes, I believe they're on a cover that I spent a long time talking about. But also, this is a fun fan thing to introduce these characters who are obscure, like Cobra Mortal, who we see at the beginning of this story. In fact, he's on the first panel,
the very first page of 25. Yeah.
Yes, he's on the first page, the first panel of this entire 12-part story. And this is a character who was originally part of the Plastorama Argentinian G.I. Joe release of figures, and then later got some American sort of homage figures.
Yeah, he was released in 2006 for the G.I. Joe convention, Cobra's Most Wanted Mercenaries set.
So, if you are a hardcore Joe fan, and it's 2007, it's spring 2007, this issue comes out, and you read this first chapter, this opening scene, you immediately get 4 Joes you know and love, and a Cobra agent who the story can have it both ways. He can either be someone new who has a costume that sort of says Cobra, even if you're not sure if he's actually Cobra. He's got a sniper rifle, so he's about to do something interesting and bad. If you are a hardcore Joe fan, you know who this is, and this is now a big Easter egg. A sort of scene is built around an Easter egg, and you can say, hey, they brought in this character, so he's now officially in continuity.
And let's not just forget as well that he looks cool and badass here. to dumb things down a little bit. It's cool.
Yes, the figure is, it's a recolor of the original 1982 Snake Eyes figure, but the original toy in Argentina is red and silver and weird. I was a little confused by the storytelling on this first page, actually, because the very first page of this first chapter, because I had to read it 3 times, because Flint looks at us when we are Cobra Mortal. All right, so Flint and Roadblock are walking with someone, and it seems like they're his guard, and they've just walked out of a building, and then Flint looks up at the assassin, Cobra Mortal, at us, and he does a finger across neck under jaw gesture to say, I thought it was, yes, go ahead and shoot the guy that I'm ostensibly guarding. I am betraying him. I'm not really his bodyguard. And I didn't know it was Flint. And then in the next panel, it's definitely Flint, and it took me a moment to realize that he and Roadblock have taken down their masks and their hoods and pulled out their giant machine guns and have now stepped in front of the guy who they were guarding. And then someone's talking to Cobra Mortal from behind him, and I thought, okay, I actually don't understand what Flint and Roadblock are doing here. So, Mark, what are Flint and Roadblock doing here? Are they actually guarding someone, or are they fake guarding him?
They're bodyguarding this Chechen rebel leader. So they're stood, side by side. They clock the Cobra Mortal and sort of pull down there. I guess they've got these sort of scarves, partly because it's cold, partly then as a disguise, so that they can't see that they're Joes.
So is the gesture the kill him, or it's not kill him?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought too much about this. I don't know whether it's he's just holding up his hand to reach for his scarf to pull it down.
That's not how you do that.
I don't know.
I think he's sort of wagging his finger, like you don't get to shoot this guy because right behind you are 2 of my friends and they have you in their sights. I think that's what this is. And I really like these 4 issues, so I don't want it to seem like, oh, the first page and I'm already, picking it apart.
And page 2, you've got Gung Ho with the Marine tattoo on his chest there still, not worrying too much about any copyright issues.
It's only 2007, Mark.
It's great to see him there. He's wearing a sort of a cut-off sleeveless top in the winter when it's snowing, which is also obviously great. And Mike Powers is doing a really good hit job, in my opinion, here with the dialogue and the characterization. That each character is talking slightly differently. They're using kind of nicknames in a way that doesn't seem sort of cringy or forced. And yeah, you've got Gung Ho sort of talking in his sort of Bayou slang. Now, that'd be one bad career move, partner. Love it.
Okay, so who's this other obscure Cobra agent on page 6?
So the other obscure character is Ghost Bear, who was a 2004 character who was the son of Quinn.
Okay. Right, okay. Oh, he's a vehicle driver.
Yeah, I think he came with a funky kind of alien powerlift armor thing.
Okay, that's why I completely ignored him. G.I. Joe Extreme fans might feel like he looks a little bit like Black Dragon. I know the hair color's off and the face mask doesn't match and the color scheme doesn't match, but he looks more like Black Dragon than anyone else does in this whole 12-issue story. I know it's not Black Dragon. I know they're not introducing a G.I. Joe Extreme character. I just thought, who is this? Well, he does look like that guy while we're, mixing in obscure Joes. Okay, so I also have a note that in this first chapter, this scene where Shipwreck and CoverGirl are being flirty with each other after they've captured Cobra Mortal is really nicely done. It's warm. It's not hitting me over the head. It doesn't take over the scene. It doesn't become a different comic book. It still feels like it could be G.I. Joe, but it is something we haven't seen. We've seen a lot of it relatively in Devil's Due G.I. Joe, but in total, all G.I. Joe, we have not seen a lot of this, and I do like it. So I have two notes sort of for the end of this issue. One is that, oh man, I don't know if you're reading this in a collection, but at the end of this first issue, there are 5 pages listing every Cobra character who is a specific person, not Techno Vipers and Alley Vipers, but like Raptor and Road Pig.
The identified threat matrix.
Yes. So in the visual design of the data desk, sort of, looks like all the inside front covers with that font and these sort of color treatments and like little headshots and little squares with codename, affiliation, and status. And it's fun because all these little headshots come from other comics. They're not drawn special just for this list. It's like, oh, well, that cesspool on the first page, that's an Andrew Wildman scan. And Voltar is a Mark Bright scan from, like issue 92 or something. So that's fun. It's not just 1 or 2 pages, it's 5 pages. So in addition to all the work that went into figuring out every Joe for the front cover of issue 25, as a counterbalance to that, at the end of the book, you get every single Cobra. And I'm just going to assume that those 5 pages are not included in the 2 paperback collections of this story. That's also okay. Issue 25 also has, as its centerfold, not a pull-out poster. You wouldn't pull it out, but the front cover and back cover printed again, but with no logo and with no title or issue number or anything. It's just the image of every Joe standing in front of the Capitol. So that's fun if you are spending all your time staring at the front cover and back cover and are distressed because Flint and Lady J and Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes' legs are covered up by words. You can see it on the inside without any words. Oh, so my 2 sort of reactions to this issue as sort of published objects are, once I realized that Mike Powers is referring to a lot of real things and places like Darfur, the Janjaweed, Sudan, I thought, oh, this isn't a Larry Hama G.I. Joe comic, because while he might use real countries like Greenland, Canada, France, Belgium, I feel like those countries, they would be made up. And then, while I was thinking of Larry Hama, as I always do when I read a Devil's Due comic, with this ongoing difficulty I have that, Devil's Due had him write so few. On the last page, there is a Mike O'Sullivan column where he celebrates the 25th anniversary of Real American Hero. And you sort of forget that that's what this comic book is. There is a 25th anniversary Real American Hero logo on the back, on the top, next to the barcode. And I thought, oh, right, okay, it's 2007. So Hasbro's starting to roll out the 25th anniversary figures, those 2 5-packs, and then additional figures that were coming later. Oh, right, people were excited about G.I. Joe in 2007 because of those toys, because of this Devil's Due publishing event, because of the anniversary celebration. A later back cover in these 4 issues we're talking about today is for that year's convention, which refers to the 25th anniversary.
And it's a nice coincidence. It's the 25th anniversary and the 25th issue at the same time.
And then within the Mike O'Sullivan editorial at the end, and he says where he got his first issue, and he says thank you to some people. He says, we have to give props to Larry Hama, who created these characters and so much of this chronology. When asked about his thoughts on the 25th anniversary, he offered, this sentence has the word thoughts in it twice. When asked about his thoughts on the 25th anniversary, he offered his thoughts. And then in a different color, there are 2 paragraphs of text from Larry Hama where he quotes an old toast about soldiering. And I thought, this is a nice nod that Hama gets to say something or do something in this anniversary issue. It's not a 4-page backup story, and I'm okay with that. It's not, hey, do you just want to write this 12-issue story? I'm okay with that. And at the same time, he is writing the monthly Storm Shadow, which doesn't last very long. So he is around. I thought that was just a nice added bit that Hama gets to say something. But he starts with, I don't really have a lot to say about the 25th anniversary of G.I. Joe or Real American Hero. So
yeah, and he'll sort of play along, and he's given some text here, but if he were to speak his real mind, it would probably be, well, you're asking me for my opinion, but you're not asking me to write the book.
Okay, so those are my notes about the first issue. You want to talk more about the first chapter? Should we hop over to chapter 2?
Well, we were talking as well about like the sort of the richness of that threat matrix and stuff, and I love when they sort of invest the time and sort of make it just beyond a sort of a 20-page kind of flick through of an issue, that you've got some back content there to really sort of sink your teeth into. And there's another piece there which is where you've got write it down. In 28, there's this map of the world where they show where all of those 203 Joes are deployed, which again is the kind of thing that you can just get lost into and sort of track all of those names and see who's who, where they are, and there's obviously been a lot of thoughts put into kind of figuring out where to stick each one of those names.
Yeah, on page 6, panel 1 of issue 28, chapter 4, Hawk and Colton are standing at the rock in front of this giant map, and it shows how the entire globe is divided into the various commands for the U.S. military, and in tiny, 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 tiny red type, which I think might be 0.5 font size, are all these little red names. And I realized, oh, those are all the Joe code names. Oh, this map is showing where all the Joes are deployed. And as you just said, then that map gets a full page. You have to turn it sideways. But after the final page in issue 28, that map is blown up to not a panel, but a full size. And it's still quite small, but you can read all these names. And I note that on the bottom left, some are at Walter Reed Medical Center.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's all of the doctors and medics.
Yeah, Dr. Talbot's.
Link. Dr. Talbot is Link, who is on that cover with every Joe. And then there's a list of Joes, location classified. Action Man, Agent Faces, Mace, Barrel Roll, Storm Shadow, which is to say guys who sneak around or have disguise. And then on the bottom, there's a list of unavailable, Dojo, Chibang, Colonel Sharp, Admiral Ledger, General Hollingsworth, Fridge, and Robo Joe, which is to say 2 ninjas I think we don't know, some characters from the cartoon that we're not going to use, and 2 characters that we can't use, won't use. Like, no one actually wants to see Robo Joe. Although we did just talk about him in our Black Horizon episode, because a tiny, tiny bit of him does he show up on that last page of the Tim Seeley, Andrew Wildman?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Well,
he's on the cover here in the top left.
Yes, of course. All right. More immediately, he is on the cover to 25.
Yeah, and I wonder if we will see Storm Shadow in this World War III event, because obviously he's got his solo series sort of running in parallel here. That I don't know whether they make a decision to kind of take him off the board and not use him at all. We'll see in the next couple of episodes.
Just remind me that this jail where they take Major Blood, is that called the Coffin?
That's right, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so the Coffin is on this map, and when we know which Joes are there, it's a lot of law enforcement Joes.
Yeah, it's like if you were going to have a G.I. Joe prison, who would you have kind of running it?
Yeah,
so you definitely have law and order.
Laws there, and
Lockdown sounds like a suitable type of name.
Yes.
General Flag Jr.
All right, so we're still hopping around in my notes. I'm sort of moving from chapter 1 to chapter 2.
Yeah, my high level on this overall thing though is that it does like this really good balancing act of having like ambitious, high stakes, globe spanning, complete cast of characters, being able to kind of call to these, 202 Joes and sort of hint at all of this activity that's going on in the world, even if we're not seeing absolutely every single bit of it. And then sort of balancing that against sort of more intimate and character focused. And I think sort of just grounding it and giving it real stakes, because like if the whole country is a kind of its threat, then sort of, you kind of, you lose focus and it's less grounded. Whereas if it's these 2 Joes on an island doing battle and looking at like they're not going to make it, that's a bit more of a tangible kind of risk and a story and something that we can sort of invest in. So yeah, sort of alongside those big stories, you kind of, even in the first issue that we were looking at initially, you kind of got those big cast of characters and lots happening, but you've still got like that one-on-one kind of activity, like the Gung Ho versus Cobra Mortal, and then Cover Girl versus Ghost Bear. We had this introduction of Agent Delta, which we'll talk about a bit more. It's sort of like bit more of a mystery sort of being threaded through the issues. We're seeing Scarlet's father and having a touching moment there. We're pausing to delve into Duke's backstory. So it's not like all of this crazy forward momentum where we don't have breathing room, which I think is a lot how a lot of other writers might potentially try and tackle something like this, that they'd be so focused on the big story that they'd lose the little story.
Yeah, I agree that this balances very well many locations, many characters, sort of big missions, small missions, side mission, also mystery, that Cobra Commander and Cobra are up to something. And in broad strokes, we know what it is. Well, he's got Mars, and he's mobilizing a lot of agents, and he's planning something big, and the title of the story is a hint. But until those missiles launch, we don't quite know what the story is. And after the missiles launch, I don't actually know what Cobra Commander's plan is. Like, is he going to the White House from Springfield? Or is he trying to take Joe headquarters? Also, I note that issue 25, for being a big kickoff to this story and an anniversary issue, not double-sized. It seems to have extra pages because of the sort of quote poster in the center, which is the cover again, and then the guide, and then the 5 pages of bad guy status at the end. But the actual comic in issue 25 is a normal 22 pages. And you know how much I like double-sized comics, and I do think issue 25s should always be double-sized, and I'm always disappointed when 25s and 75s aren't. But
it almost feels double size. It feels dense, but it doesn't
Yes.
feel overcrowded. It doesn't feel like it's going too quickly or too slowly.
And then, you know, my test for a lot of comics, could I give this comic to a non-comic fan? Would they like it? Could they follow it? Could I give this comic to a lapsed G.I. Joe fan? Would they like it? Could they follow it? G.I. Joe, yes, definitely. Non-comics fan, I don't know that they would particularly like this, but considering how many characters and how many locations and how many subplots, you know, I don't think issue 25, I don't think these 4 issues are impenetrable. I think they are, you know, 2 years into a specific continuity, 6 years into a larger continuity.
And 25 years into an even larger continuity.
But, you know, because it's a part 1, you know, characters do identify themselves. And even if you don't know sort of who Shipwreck is and who CoverGirl are, you are immediately in with them. And then, you know, there's even a scene later in these 4 issues where Roadblock and Duke comment on this relationship between Shipwreck and CoverGirl. There's a scene where Hawk says, it's Hawk, not Colton, right? Hawk says, no, go for it.
Yeah. It's a scene in the gym with Shipwreck and Hawk in the wheelchair.
10.
Isn't it?
Thank you. Issue 26, part 2, page 10. And my note, in fact, is Mike Baer, great expressions. And after, on the final panel of that page, after Hawk has said, no, go for it, there's just nice subtle character work in how, you know, what Mike Baer isn't doing for me with some of this extra exaggeration and oomph. You know, when Roadblock kicks down a door somewhere in these 4 issues, it's not, as I said in a previous episode, he doesn't seem to be using a lot of the sort of Jack Kirby, John Buscema superheroic tradition of comics as much as a more realistic tradition of illustration. And so, you know, when characters are sort of running or punching or jumping, there isn't the oomph that I want, but it's all quite handsome. And his, you know, as I said about that cover, you know, his acting is good and his storytelling is clear, except for that first page. While I'm picking on the arts in this second chapter, on page 17 of issue 26, I have a note. So Firefly and Snake Eyes are fighting, and I like the fight. It's good. It makes use of some different sort of, you know, room, hallway, and then they go down through a hole in the floor, and they're in a very different kind of room, which feels very like, you know, training, death trappy. And I thought it's a little silly that Snake Eyes brings an Uzi to a sword fight, to a fist fight, but at least Firefly comments on it. So I just want to say, let me just back up and say one thing that I'm going to interrupt myself. On page 4 of this issue, when Firefly is revealed and he's got a bunch of ninja with him, and he has very dramatically set just the railing on fire, which I don't quite understand, but okay, it looks cool. Firefly is far away. It's a full page. It's got the credits. He says, there's nothing you have that I cannot take away. And Snake Eyes and Scarlet are surrounded. And I have this rule, which is if you draw and color Firefly, he has to be in camo and it has to be clear. And I spent a little time on this on my blog when I was reviewing issue 250, where Firefly shows up and gives the Joe Ninjas a hard time, and the art doesn't go out of its way to make his camo really obvious, and the color is really aggressive and dark, and you kind of can't tell he's in camo. And I'm looking at this page and I'm thinking, hey, it's a guy who's dressed a lot like Snake Eyes up on that upper ledge looking down at Snake Eyes. And I know from context it's Firefly, because Scarlet has said, you know, we're going to your ninja headquarters. That guy who's ruined everything in your ninja life might be there. Snake Eyes doesn't nod, but we know he's nodding. And then a guy who could be Firefly shows up, and a couple pages later, you do see camo. But man, as a rule, you know, it's like the same way that sort of, you know, in G.I. Joe comics, Flint can't grow a beard because then he looks like a different Joe. You know, like Falcon can't wear a black shirt because then he looks like Flint. So, so yes, if you are keeping track of Devil's Due costumes, you know, Snake Eyes has purged his ninja stuff. He's just a commando, and he's in his sort of ribbed black long sleeve sweatshirt. And Firefly has the shoulder pads and his original pouches and grenades. But just on that page, I thought, I know this is Firefly, but it doesn't quite look like Firefly. Okay, so let me stop interrupting myself.
Yeah. As an aside, from issue 25, where we see Flint, he has that kind of neckerchief around his mouth and he pulls it down around his neck. And if you got a G.I. Joe with a kind of beret and a green neckerchief around their neck, that kind of becomes Falcon. So
right.
got to be careful.
And if you have the... I'm going a step further here, and now I'm just telling a joke. If you have the like desaturated colors of a very talented Beaulieu on this arc, I might think it's Sonic Fighter's Falcon. Okay, so Firefly and Snake Eyes are fighting. Snake Eyes tosses away his gun and is just using his knife, and Firefly slashes Snake Eyes in the back. What better place for you to finally give up the ghost? This is page 17. And then Snake Eyes has sort of an uncharacteristic pose. This is the final panel of the page. He's sort of hunching forward and he's sort of holding his back, and in that like Spider-Man eyes, Deadpool eyes way, you know, his Snake Eyes' visor is like shaped like his eyes actually would be, like, oh no, ow. And then in the color, it's really subtle, but there are these sort of 4 or 5 like light dots around his head. And then Firefly has to explain it. Oh, the poison I tipped my knife with. And I thought, oh, okay, Snake Eyes is getting woozy. And then I turn the page and it's more clear because of his body language. He's now down on his hands and knees. He's holding up one hand to his eyes. And I just really wish on these 2 panels at the end of the previous page and the beginning of this page, that these little like dizzy bubbles around his head were much clearer.
Okay. As a contrasting view, I did like this sequence, and I thought that kind of bubble, kind of intoxication, kind of hints, and Snake Eyes' body language here was, spot on. I thought it was really effective because, you know, he's got this sort of expressionless mask, black costume. It's very easy to have it all looking the same and a little bit hard to kind of see exactly what's going on underneath all that. So I thought it was definitely handled in terms of body language, of reaching around and sort of touching his back, the kind of woozy body language, the dots suggesting that he's been somehow drugged, and him on his hands and knees on the floor, sort of staring at his hand. I thought it was very nicely done.
In chapter 3, issue 27, we have a guest artist, Mike Shoyket, who I was not familiar with. And it turns out, 80s kids, that he drew some Tron. And I sort of had to rack my brains a little bit. I had totally forgotten that Slave Labor Graphics did a Tron miniseries that sort of continues the story of the movie. I think because there was a computer game at the time, and Slave Labor had some other Disney licenses at the time, like Haunted Mansion and Gargoyles. So anyway, Mike Shoyket is he's an artist. He's a graphic designer. He's drawn some comics. He's based in New Jersey. He's done a little bit for DC, and he's worked in animation. But his comics career is pretty short. And this issue of G.I. Joe that he draws, issue 27, part 3 of this story, it does look a little different than Mike Baer. It looks more like Josh Medor's.
Yeah, I agree.
It's got a little bit more grit. Characters are a little harder and lines are a little sharper. And in fact, I think this issue, I think he's penciling and inking. I don't think this 3rd chapter, this fill-in art, is pencils only.
The blacks look very black, don't they?
Yeah, and all the lines look clean. And I'm seeing what I think is a little bit of that sort of 3 steps removed David Finch influence that I saw in Josh Meador's work in some earlier issues of Americas
or
Elite.
someone like Michael Gaydos, who worked on Alias and things like that. Bit of that. Quite a bit. It looks like there's a bit of like sort of photo referencing of how faces and expressions are drawn.
Yeah, like a couple pages in, there's this panel when Shipwreck wakes up by himself on the beach after he and CoverGirl have woken up, and he now sees her dog tag. And there's a panel where looking right up his face. It's a very Gil Kane panel. You see his hand and his face, and we're looking from below. And that's a hard angle to draw faces at, and most people are going to use photo reference for such a face angle. And I do not say that as a criticism. So this issue has more stuff, as we have been talking about, with Shipwreck and CoverGirl. It's got Duke and his dad, and I thought, we have met Duke's dad another time in the universe of G.I. Joe, but not this continuity and not any comics continuity. In the 2011 episode of G.I. Joe Renegades, Duke goes home, and his dad is Max Hauser, voiced by Michael Bell, who played Duke in 1983 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, the animated G.I. Joe. And in fact, here, this dad of Duke's is named Max Hauser. So, all right, so this episode is 2011, which makes me wonder if, the people who wrote that episode said, hey, we're going to have Duke go home so we can do this fan thing where the guy who used to play Duke plays Duke's dad, but is kind of playing Duke, but not really. He's Duke's dad. Has this guy ever been named? Oh, there was a comic book in 2007 where he's named Max. There we go. Or if there is a third appearance of a Max Hauser that neither you or I know and we're missing. But anyway, I just hope our listeners will think I'm very clever for remembering that episode of Renegades. So I do like this. I do like this stuff with, and then the other reference here to make is, again, looking forward. This is not something that Devils Do is looking back at. But there's another time in G.I. Joe storytelling when Duke is revealed to have some family, and that's in the Real American Hero Larry Hama IDW comic book, when it is revealed that Duke is married.
Mm-hmm.
And then that character shows up a couple more times. So it turns out, have we ever known that Duke was an artist before he joined the military?
No, I think this is all new, and I really liked it. It sort of really fleshed out his background and sort of that him kind of almost rebelling against his more sort of liberal protester dad, and sort of by rebelling instead of sort of dropping out, he's sort of dropping in and joining the military, and his the tragic backstory with his mum and how he got his code name of Duke, where that came from, was a touching moment as well. So I really enjoyed this subplot and how that fitted in and filled out his backstory.
A real institution gets mentioned twice in these issues: SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, which is an art school in Georgia, which in the 90s was the only accredited college in America that had a comics major, a sequential art major. And I'm sure by now there are others. Certainly by now, many, many, many other schools have comics classes, comics tracks, comics minors, but a major or a department that was unique to SCAD at the time.
A real feeder college for Devil's Due. The certainly the editor Mike O'Sullivan, the artist Mike Baer, and the cover artist Chris Lai, I believe, at a minimum, those three all attended SCAD.
Yeah, had some. I feel like a couple earlier Joe artists at Devil's
Yeah,
Due
and there
had
was
also.
Robert Atkins.
Yes.
Yeah, a good handful. A good handful, definitely.
Yes, and Hasbro hired some people who went to RISD in the 80s because, here's a company that needs designers, and there's a design school a couple miles down the road. And Kenner hired people from the University of Ohio, I think, because Kenner needed artists in design. This is in the 50s and the 60s and 70s and 80s. And there's a school in town. So I know that Savannah and Chicago aren't all that near each other. But yes, as you say, a feeder school. Max Hauser, Duke's dad, has a Grateful Dead shirt. It's kind of tie-dyed. And is this sort of President Bush? Is this sort of Condoleezza Rice in these issues?
Was there a particular page you were thinking of?
In issue 27, just a couple pages from the end, when we're in the sort of war room and Colton is talking. They're sitting around a table, and the president says, "Madam Secretary, get in touch with our allies in Jordan and Egypt, ... Gentlemen, I want a plan on how to effectively deploy our remaining assets. All of them."
Yeah, I don't know that he looks very Bush-like to me. He doesn't sort of particularly put me in mind of Bush, but that sort of silhouette of that kind of bob haircut, I guess, is Condoleezza Rice-esque.
She gets a bit of dialogue a page earlier. She says, "I understand you have assets in several of those theaters, General." And he says, something, Madam Secretary. Maybe it's sort of the president. I mean, there have been comics in, at Marvel and DC and Image where they are drawing the very specific, Jimmy Carter is on the cover of the DC special that was Superman versus Muhammad Ali. That's definitely Jimmy Carter. And Ronald Reagan is definitely in The Dark Knight Returns. And I don't remember who is definitely in Mark Millar and Brian Hitch's The Ultimates, but Brian Hitch, I'm sure, drew that president perfectly, and it was really that president at the time. Maybe it's Bush, because that comic started in 2000. But also sometimes you just have a president who can be a stand-in for the real person, who like the president in Superman 3 or the president in Marvel's Secret Invasion, the TV show. Okay.
But this president, for storytelling purposes, is the same president who had Cobra Commander as his chief of staff. So I imagine he's feeling pretty burnt by that still, which is probably why he's so compliant about trying to be on the front foot about taking action here.
Right. That is a good reminder.
Because often in G.I. Joe storytelling, the typical plot is more like, the government holding them back and saying they can't go on the offensive, they can't be proactive, and the Joes will have to take special leave to do the missions that they actually need to do to try and combat Cobra. Whereas here they're being encouraged to have the resources that they want and need, and be on the front foot and sort of proactively seek out Cobra. So a slightly different dynamic to what we have often seen beforehand.
I think Larry Hama has never written an American president in a G.I. Joe story. I think the highest we go is the Jugglers. I think the highest we go are, Pentagon generals.
I bet you there is has been a phone call to the president.
We've never seen him.
Off screen, yeah.
I would bet it's not a phone call that someone has just mentioned hearing from the president. But I bet it's only been once or twice.
Yeah.
Here's another fun thing in issue 27. This is that fill-in. So Skullbuster is beating up Shipwreck and taunting him, and CoverGirl frees herself. She's been tied up and tied to a rock, and she frees herself from the rock and then slides. I don't mean headquarters. I mean yeah. Like a granite thing that sticks out of the ground, a rock. And then she slides down this sort of mountain hill while she's still tied up. So, oh man, is her arm going to get cut up? And there's just a nice bit where letterer Brian J. Crowley takes her word balloon where she's making a noise, which is spelled MMNNFF, which I believe is pronounced as she's sliding down to rescue her guy, her comrade, and is also tied up. And Crowley tilts the word balloon at an angle to match that she's sliding down at an angle. Just a little nice thing that I like. Okay, so we've got this. We should check in with this subplot with Agent Delta, who has a name, Rourke.
Yep.
And when this character first shows up in the first chapter in Boston and wants to talk to a priest in confession, I thought, okay, this is someone important. Okay, on the last page of the second chapter, an Agent Delta contacts Sparks at The Rock, Actual Joe headquarters, not an outcropping from the ground that CoverGirl is tied up to. And I thought, who is Agent Delta should we know? Because so much of this story and a lot of G.I. Joe comics are about pulling in lesser used or obscure characters and making a little something of them, because there are hundreds of characters, and for fans, any toy is someone's favorite. And so I thought, okay, this is so shocking to Sparks that he dropped his coffee mug, which I feel like no one really does in real life. I feel like people only do that in movies and TV, but I'll allow it. The story's called World War III. And I thought, oh, do I just not know enough about G.I. Joe? And one of the mega fans at a convention would say, oh yes, Agent Delta, so-and-so, so-and-so. But it turns out that this is an
I like that you don't consider yourself a mega fan, Tim.
Thank you. I mean, there's so many foreign characters I don't know their names. There are so many Hasbro 2000 to 2008 figures that I don't know. I didn't know Skullbuster, who's the guy who I thought was Black Dragon in his weird Exo Squad suit. Okay, so I do know who inked a certain Marvel cover, but a lot of toy characters I don't know. So just to say this to you, Mark, and for our listeners. When we come to the story, none of us know who Agent Delta is. None of us know who Rourke is. And I think even on that last page, when Sparks gets the message, we don't know that Agent Delta is that guy who we saw in Boston.
No, not yet.
So it takes a couple chapters sort of checking in for a page or two of this subplot to sort of converge that, oh, the guy in Boston is Agent Delta, is Rourke, is a deep cover agent from before 1982. But then he talks to Cobra Commander, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and it seems like is he warning the Joes or is he taunting the Joes?
He's warning the Joes, yeah. He's sort of, I guess the implication is that he has been with or in Cobra or freelancing for Cobra for, since before G.I. Joe was formed, that, he had a direct line, top secret direct line only to General Flagg, and has probably to some degree gone native, because if you're there for that long and not reporting back, you're going to be deep in it. And he's having this crisis of faith that it's gone too far. They're going to start World War III. You can do so much, but actually to have such an extreme event, to have Cobra go so far is too much. And this is the point that he's going to have to turn back to the Joe side and betray Cobra.
Yes, I'll correct myself, because when I asked you, is he taunting them or warning them? His message on the final page of issue 26 is to warn you, warn everyone. Okay, and then he makes the cover. I guess we still need. He makes the cover of 28. He's the guy with the sniper rifle. I also wondered when we first see him, but he's not named, he's not identified. I thought, is this Kamakura? Is this Billy? Is this one of these very important, characters who's come and gone and sort of been a good guy but then left, or sort of been a bad guy but then left?
Because after all, they've got 202 named Joes here that they could call on, and a good number of Cobras. So they do, it's interesting that they decide to introduce a brand new character. And I guess the benefit of that is that, he's a blank slate. He's a mystery. We don't know what his story is. They can do something new and unexpected and unpredictable with this character.
Yeah, if you bring in Cobra Mortal, if he's the big, surprise of the story, he's been around the whole time, he's been doing something, and now he's really important. You run the risk of, someone saying, "Oh, but in Argentina there was one comic in a magazine which said who this character was," or someone would say, no, I have this association with this character.
It's interesting now. So as you say that, and I was like, yeah. Maybe they could have he could be the unmasked Cobra Mortal, and he's got this funky backstory. I mean, that could certainly have worked. But
to your point, if Delta,
you attach baggage.
If Delta Rourke is any specific action figure or previously seen character in a G.I. Joe story, then we have associations. If it's like, oh, it's Scarlett's other sister, who's other sibling, who's not in the episode's Captives of Cobra. It's not Shaban, who wants to unplug her from light support, after issue 92. Like, oh, wait, she had another sister? Like, well, what about the family? It's like, this guy is, as you say, a blank slate. And this also ends up being a nice reference back to the formation of G.I. Joe, which is really vague in the Larry Hama and the Devil Stew stories, and I think fairly so, and General Flag, who dies in issue 16, right? He's not around for very long in the comics. And so, the thing that we're more used to is sort of Colton and a connection to 1960s and 70s Hasbro product, Action Soldier, 12-inch Joe, Adventure Team. So I do hope that this character, Rourke, will sort of earn his place in the soap opera of G.I. Joe. B, if he has some connection to, Cobra Commander or, Conrad and Max Hauser, or like the Ninjas. I hope that it doesn't feel forced, because there are a lot of threads connecting these characters, from the Larry Hama continuity and then since then, and also I hope that he gets an interesting costume, because as of right now, on the cover of 28,
a black t-shirt and a green jacket's not doing it for you.
It's okay. I don't dislike it, but like Billy. It's like I never needed a Billy action figure, because Billy walks around for half of, Marvel G.I. Joe in like jeans and a button up, shorts and a button up. Or he's just wearing a junior version of Storm Shadow's costume.
Yeah, you're talking to someone that rubbed off the logo off his V1 Storm Shadow so that he could have a Billy figure.
Whoa.
It was a beta figure, that's all right.
I spy with my little eye.
I had some I Spies.
Yeah.
We've not talked about. The Boston Priest character. I don't know if the Boston church that they're at, you sort of recognise with that St. George and the Dragon stained glass window. But
I don't spend any time in South Boston, so I don't know.
The look of the Boston Priest character was based on military advisor Phil Kost.
Okay, good.
And I noticed towards the end of issue 25, there was some suspect saluting going on. Hawk, Colton, and Duke all saluting to the middle of their kind of forehead hairline. And knowing that this was a bugbear for friend of the show, Bart Simon, I asked him what he had to say about that. And needless to say, he was not impressed. Here's Bart.
Hey guys, Bart here. So I'm looking at these two pictures you sent me, and these are pretty effed up salutes. There is a correct way to do it. I'll attach some documentation I found online with a quick Google search, which just leads me to believe that whoever this artist was just lazy and doesn't know how to work the internet. Because you definitely do not salute from the middle of your forehead at the hairline. No idea where he's getting that from. Maybe some bad Hollywood movie, or like I said, just laziness. These guys are Delta. Maybe Delta has their own secret squirrel salute. I don't know. To my knowledge, I've never met any Delta guys, but I don't think they really go around advertising who they are either. So there's a proper way to salute indoors, outdoors, and there's kind of a couple unwritten rules. The one file I'm going to send you, or web link, if you scroll down a little bit, it tells you how to properly render a salute. It leaves out a specific term on how you do it. All right, so there's a thing called a gig line. So if you start at your chin and you go down to your nuts, where your shirt buttons down to your belt buckle, down to your fly, is called your gig line. So when your hands at your side, your fingertips run up that gig line to the side of your face for the salute, keeping your arm out to the side and everything at like a 90-degree angle, forming that lazy triangle or whatever when you get up to your head. So you do want to have your middle finger tip on the edge of your hat whenever you're saluting outdoors. Indoors, it'll be at that same location, just between the eye and the eyebrow-ish. If you're touching your eyebrow, you're cool. Hand is turned slightly so the palm's facing you, slightly downish. If you wear glasses, then your fingertip will go to the tip of your glasses in that same location. There's like unofficial FU salute. So if you're outside and you see an officer you don't know, you'll give him a proper salute fairly quickly because you are walking and there's a certain distance you have to do this within. They'll salute you back, you drop your salute, you keep on going. If you're in a hurry or if you just don't care, you just throw one up real quick. Who cares what it looks like? Acknowledge his existence and keep on walking. If it's somebody you don't like, you still have to give him a salute, but then you'll give him one of those middle of the head, forehead hairline salutes like in the picture as a kind of a FU to that guy is, hey, I'm acknowledging you're an officer, but I'm not rendering you a proper salute because I don't like your ass, is basically it. So based off of all that, whoever drew those pictures, I don't remember, just didn't take the time to find the proper way to do that. I hope that answers everything for you.
So a big thanks to Bart for sending that in, the Talking Joe official saluting correspondent. Bart actually noticed a particularly egregious salute all the way back in G.I.Joe issue 11. So it's a nice bit of symmetry that we're getting salute corrections as we're reaching the conclusion. So in conclusion, if you're saluting, it's not the middle of the top of your forehead. It's basically to the side, kind of eyebrow level. What else? We had appearance of Ibrahim, the Mossad agent who was last seen hunting Nazis in Brazil in the pages of Special Missions issue 2 from 1986. We had the reappearance of the October Guard. So that was Verona, aka Dana, revisiting her previous colleagues to reach out to them. And can you name the October Guard, Tim?
Oh, man.
Here we go. Name the guard. Can you name the guard? Are they October or December or November or from Russia? Yeah. Can you name the guard? Is it that hard? Name them.
This is issue 28.
I mean, it's hard because there's the original lineup, and then some of them die in Special Missions 26, and then in
I'm hearing a lot of excuses, not a lot of names.
I'm turning to the page, sir. Okay.
I think the guy on the far left is just a random Russian soldier that we don't know.
Well, I don't see horror show. Breckhoff is sitting with the hat.
Both Horror Show and Breckhoff are dead at this point in time.
Colonel Kremov. Red Star. I don't know.
Red Star sitting down.
Oh, good. Isn't this right when they did that 3-pack? The October Guard 3-pack that came with an issue?
Ooh, could be, yeah.
I think it had issue 101 or 102 in it, actually. No, I can't identify their names. There's Glasses Guy, there's New Guy, there's Other New Guy, and there's Non-Player Character Guy on the left, as you just said.
So we have from let's start top left and go clockwise. We have got Big Bear, Sergeant Mishka, Dragonsky, and Red Star.
Right. Wait, isn't he in purple? Wouldn't I have known that if he's colored right? Come on.
Well, he can't be purple all the time. Sometimes he's just hanging out in, candlelight.
I have an I Spy and I have an I Spy question. Back in the first chapter of this story, when Cobra Mortal is getting away, on page 16, on the top left of the page, it's a left side page if you're reading the issue, it says 20 minutes later, and we're looking at a dock, and there's snow, and there's a bunch of bubbles in the water. And is that the front pod of a Cobra bug? That's surfacing, and then in the third panel, Cobra Mortal is running toward it on the snowy pier.
Yeah, good spot. I did not clock that, first of all.
So, and then we see just a smidge of it in 2 more panels on the next page. And now I don't know what issue this was because I got all 4 comics in front of me. But at one point we cut back to Destro's castle, and then the back.
Wait. While we're in that scene, as well as seeing that bug pod, Shipwreck is sort of hiding underwater, and so he's able to kind of grab Mortal, from below as he's sort of descending towards the bug on the ladder. And I think that possibly Shipwreck here is meant to be in his V2 costume, which is kind of more of a wetsuited look to him.
That's nice.
Because he is a Navy SEAL.
Yes. Very good. Somewhere in one of these 4 issues, I forget. They're just in front of me now. I'm not looking at my notes. We're at Castle Destro, and in a very small panel in the background, we see a Cobra Fang and a what's that white armor that Cobras are in?
The snake armor. The
snake armor, and then I don't know, a ferret or a fang, a stinger or something. So I think I made the point before in some Disavowed episodes that the Devil's Due G.I. Joe is a little less occupied with G.I. Joe vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because, one, they don't have to be. That Hasbro was not forcing them to introduce any specific toys, whereas at Marvel from 82 to 94, Hama was. But also, Hama is interested in gear. I think he likes maybe not all the vehicles and accessories, but some of them. So he will write them into stories and have characters sort of call out some stats, or it's like, we got to get the Wolverine and the Vamp 2 and the Pulverizer onto the C-130. We fly to so-and-so. And so that the bug does show up here is fun. But, also note that part of why you can have so many characters and so many scenes and so many locations in these 4 issues is because almost no pages are being spent with Joe's loading up vehicles, transporting from A to B, unloading vehicles, talking about vehicles. And there are no vehicle drivers so far. And I know you can have a vehicle driver show up in a Joe story without their vehicle. And I know you can have them drive or fly a vehicle that's not theirs. I don't think Hama's written the Dragonfly flown by Wild Bill in 150 issues, but that's fine. And so this is not a criticism. This is an observation. This is another example of the different flavor of the Devil's Due G.I. Joe.
The one vehicle that did appear in these issues very briefly was a Night Raven, which had been kitted out with this invisibility function. And the implication is that they've hacked Wraith's technology and they've kitted out, they've used his experimental stealth armor to kind of develop the capability to have it on the plane, even if for brief periods. But my favorite part of this sequence with the Night Raven is that it has a coffee cup holder with a cup of coffee in the plane.
Speaking of the Night Raven, my brother had a Night Raven and I had a Night Raven. Are the pilots not facing the same direction in the cockpit? I'm trying to remember. I certainly remember how the cockpit sort of folds down.
I don't think I've ever actually owned a Night Raven. Okay. So I can't draw my own experience, but maybe they're playing with the design, that they're having a different kind of layout.
Okay, I'm looking at a picture of the toy, and based on the picture that I'm seeing, as with the Sky Striker, if one guy's facing forward, so is the guy behind him. And in this issue, it's more like the Snowspeeder in Empire Strikes Back, where Luke is facing forward and what's-his-name is facing back. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. This is not a criticism. This is not like, oh, Devil's Due doesn't use much of the vehicles and they get them wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I do feel like this part of the story where Cobra gets Mars and sort of ramps up the armament that it has and how it deploys them and the sort of lethality of them, I feel like it's exaggerated or accelerated in a sort of unfair or unrealistic way here, because I feel like there's a line missing where Destro, before Cobra Commander takes Mars, in all the G.I. Joe stories before this, Destro was holding some of his best stuff back or was selling enough of it to other countries or groups that, Cobra couldn't get all of it, or Destro was, sort of slowly developing some new extra special, extra lethal stuff. And I feel like there are a couple pieces of dialogue in these 4 issues where Cobra Commander says, or the Joes are reacting, or the brass are reacting, that Cobra is unleashed and uninhibited now with all of Mars sort of on its side. And I thought that could make sense. I'm missing a line of dialogue or a scene where that's sort of properly explained. And I'm not really bothered by that, but I do feel like sort of the extra threat of Cobra here is missing a small step.
I was going to say, this is a sort of a segue into what I picked out as my favorite line of dialogue.
Quote of the week, 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 quote of the week.
I'm going to guess. Is it between Cobra Commander and Alexander?
No, it wasn't. But it wasn't necessarily the most dramatic piece of dialogue, but it sort of got me thinking a little bit, and it sort of connected to how we've been discussing the Destro series from Skybound and our kind of, our expectations of that character. I think it's from 25, and it's a line of dialogue between Sparks and Colton. And Sparks says, "How did it come to this, General Colton? I always suspected Destro's code of honor was a facade, but I thought he was at least sane. By handing Mars over to Cobra Commander, Destro and the Baroness have virtually guaranteed that thousands will die." It was that element of him saying, I always suspected Destro's code of honor was a facade, because, he's a character with this ostensible code of honor, and he's at times kind of intervenes to show some of that honor and work with the Joes who he kind of respects and admires, etc. But at the same time, he's worked very, very closely with Cobra. He's an arms dealer. He's a baddie. So, that code of honor is somewhat facetious, somewhat manufactured, just like an arms factory, just like a missile.
I do think that all the dialogue between Cobra Commander and Alexander is great. There are 2 scenes, one where they're talking seated inside and one where they're in the Night Raven. And it's great that Cobra Commander is sort of there's a line. It might be my favorite line. It's something like, "I don't need your loyalty. I need your." Anyway, I'm sure it's in one of these comic books in front of me. But you think that Cobra Commander is going to throw Alexander in jail or shoot him or make him do something embarrassing, and he says, "No, I need you to run Mars with me for me."
It's a great scene. Cobra Commander says, "I don't want you broken, Alexander. I'm interested in your skills, not your loyalty." And he does this clever trick of taking off of his mask and revealing his real face to Alexander, which feels like a real sort of power play of like, look at the sort of confidence and faith I'm putting in you. By revealing this, most secret of secret. He's not really giving very much away. He's just showing his real face, and to some degree, what does it matter what his real face looks like? But what a powerful message or connection he's building by doing that.
Yeah, I had an I Spy question mark in the 4th chapter here, issue 28, on page 16, when we're on the submarine. Blackout has just launched the missiles, and he says, "Access code 73164. Mission is a success. Missiles are away." And I thought, July 31st, 1964, what about the G.I. Joe launch year does that represent? And I don't know, but G.I. Joe first shows up in 1964. So maybe this is just someone's birthday, someone who worked on the comic, or a family member of someone who worked on this comic, or maybe it's when the so-and-so product was released in that first year of G.I. Joe. Although I also feel like a lot of that is really hard information to pin down and verify. But if you say 64 in a G.I. Joe comic, I'm going to think that's the year it started.
Very good. 60th anniversary. 64 plus 60 is quick maths. Right. I had a light error detected, which was in Major Blood's dialogue when he is taken to this new prison and is sort of surprised by the top security nature of that prison, and is sort of taken from looking like he's sort of smug on his high horse to being somewhat deflated, and he says, "Sod me," and I call this a light error detected because it's fine, but as in terms of an expression you would use, you would typically hear "sod off," "sod it," "oh sod it," and if you're going to do it to yourself, it would be "bagger me." So "sod me" doesn't really it's not it doesn't feel such a genuine slang term.
Fair. I will wrap up my comments by just saying again what a really lovely job color artist Beaulieu does here. Really nice sense of light. Scenes have different colors. The flashback to young Duke when his mom is sick in the hospital, as opposed to the scene right before it with finding the October Guard. Outside it's all cool blues. Inside it's all lit by fire and yellow, but also just really nice work, whatever the scene is, with, modern computer coloring and some rendering, but not overdoing it, and just it's all lovely. So great color work on this, and I think this color artist does all 12 chapters, so that's nice.
Yeah, and I'll call out, while we're talking art as well, I'll call out that Bear, I think, generally does a really great job, but particularly on kits, I want to call out that a lot of the weaponry that he uses, it looks very real worldly. It's got details there. He's paid attention to the details and making it look right, and he often doesn't go for the simplest angle on these things. We talked about that panel in the first issue that he did, where there was some great foreshortening. As the sort of the gun was being pointed towards us as the reader. So there's a lot more of that going on as well. So tip of the hat to him for being. He's paying a lot of detail to to the details of kits, accessories, scenery, backgrounds, perspective. He's putting in the hard work here.
Yes, I agree with
you know, the a waiting room chair, a desk, magazines on a side table, a lamp. All of these things, they're not exciting. They're not what you go into comics to necessarily draw, but all of these little things look right. And a lot of comic artists don't get those more mundane things right.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I'll say one not great thing about Bear's storytelling here, and then one great thing about his art. The panel in this at the end of this final issue, chapter 4, when Cobra Interrogator shoots and Max Hauser, Duke's dad, jumps to save him. It looks like Interrogator has just shot Duke's dad's head point blank.
Yeah. It's not. That definitely that panel there. It's not. It's a confusing layout on that blam.
The composition, it's like, okay, I see what's happening. Where his head is lines up in front of where the pistol was when it fired. So there's this muzzle flash, but then the pistol's jerking up from its recoil, and there is a tiny like explosion of blood on Max Hauser's shoulder, but you sort of don't see that. It just looks like he's exploding his head with this like yellow burst of pistol death. And I thought, yikes. And then 2 panels later, his head is intact and there's a shadow all on the floor. And I thought, oh man, it's just bleeding everywhere. Like, no, that's a shadow. And they said,
right, yeah.
They said, bullet just winged you in the side. I thought, wait, is that what just happened? So, okay. Bear draws 3 great issues, and 1 panel, the storytelling gets obscured because of composition. But not only does he draw good, as you said, kit, and as I've said previously, faces and acting, he's drawing some different faces, which I appreciate. And also the flashback with Duke really looks like, I don't know, 10 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
But it also looks like Duke. Mm-hmm. And some of this is the power of suggestion. The scene is, telling you that it's Duke in flashback and he's got blonde hair. But, there are some great comics artists out there who are great at everything, but not kids. And
have a look at the way that Rob Liefeld draws kids, or even someone like John Byrne, I think has struggled.
I'm always ready to criticize Mr. Liefeld, but I will say that in what was that Onslaught? What was that Heroes Reborn anniversary miniseries that Jeff Loeb wrote? And it's like Onslaught Reborn or Onslaught Resurrected, and Liefeld draws Franklin Richards, and he's definitely using photo reference, which I don't think he's ever done. And he draws a not terrible kid in 2 panels of that. But anyway,
somebody else did it and he took the credit.
I'll talk more about Rob Liefeld when we eventually cover Dead Game. And Bear is juggling, and not just old people, but Max Hauser looks like an older man, not just a man with lines on his face. And then in the flashback, Max Hauser looks like a younger man. So Bear is showing a lot of chops here.
Very good, yeah, for sure. Are we done with this one? Should we give a rating?
Yeah.
Do you want to go first?
8. This is very good. This is 7. I don't know. Okay. You know what would make this even better? Not just good covers, and the cover to 25, it's its own special thing, but like a cover artist. The way that right now Real American Hero has Andy Kubert doing the covers, the way that Michael Golden shows up to do the final cover for this issue 36. These are good covers. But it is always, anyway, 7 or 8. This is a very good G.I. Joe story. I'd like more vehicles.
Yeah, I'm going high again. I think I scored 10 last time. I might have got a bit carried away, but this is really good. I think it's just about as good as G.I. Joe comics get. So I'm going to give it a 9.5. I think the half point is maybe, as you say, the covers not super exciting, and 25 aside, and just as well the while issue 27 art was not bad, just I think the inconsistency of the artistic team across the issues made it suffer a little bit. But yeah, I think issue 27 was still pretty good, and there's a lot of nice sequences within it, even artistically. So yeah, in conclusion, I thought it was art was great, writing was great, really good at dealing with the big story, and also those the smaller character moments, and sort of definitely kind of you're getting a sense of stakes and a ramping up of those as we're getting into the full-blown World War III. Great. So next time on Talking Joe Disavowed, we will cover the next 4 issues of World War III. So it will be the mid part of this final America's Elite storyline. And when we're not talking about Devil's Due comics from almost 20 years ago, we cover comics from today. So the very latest issues from Skybound as they are coming out. If you want to find out more about us, you can go to the website. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website, and that has links to all of the places you can find us. On Facebook, where we have regular postings and discussions about latest news and the current episodes of Talking Joe as they're released. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/talkingjoe. A big thanks to our backers: Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Shane, Ryan, Simon, Chris, Joe, Craig, Frank, and Mike, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as exclusive content. It is very likely that they will have had this particular episode a long time in advance of it getting scheduled into our regular calendar. So, if you want to be like them, you know what to do. And if you've listened all the way to the end of this episode and enjoyed it, why not think about making sure that you have given us a thumbs up, if that capability exists on the platform you are listening to, a 5-star rating as well on your podcast provider of choice. We've not had any ratings coming through in the last little while, so it'd be nice to have just another one pop into my feed with 5 stars delivered right into my inbox. Tim, when you are not hearing me desperately encouraging our listeners to give us nice ratings on podcast platforms, where can you be found?
Video essays on television and film at our YouTube channel at Atomic Abe. My brick and mortar comic book store is Hub Comics in Somerville, Massachusetts, close to Boston and South Boston.
Put on your hazmat suits.
I wonder if we'll see any devastation in the next issue. And my blog, where I write about G.I. Joe, is arealamericanbook.com.
Very good. So that is us done for another week. And until we're back next time, please remember,
nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters. Where was I going with that?